If it ain't another franchise that needs no introduction, while I don't know how popular Scooby-Doo is outside of America, Star Wars is a global phenomenon seeing reach all over the world. The George Lucas created series is the birthplace for a lot of creative ideas seen in other movies, shows, games, anime, what have you. An irony not lost on me, seen as Lucas drew from inspirations like Flash Gordon and Akira Kurosawa. It can't be understated the marvel that is Star Wars, the original title of A New Hope for those younger in the crowd, its impact in the cultural zeitgeist, well, of making Mark Hamill a household name or the above-mentioned tropes used in other stories, or how it kickstarted a new phase in visual effects artistry as industrial light and sound was born with the film the studio Spielberg would pick from Jurassic Park. Star Wars was a once-in-a-lifetime film, so no matter how hard the series falls from grace with many decisions from the all-consuming marvel that is Disney, the original trilogy, though sadly not in their original format, will stand the test of time. But we aren't talking about any film, book, or story of that era. Instead, I picked something closer to my generation, having grown up with the visually creative, if narratively lacking, prequel trilogy. While I do have an appreciation for the original 3 movies, those aren't my Star Wars in the sentimental sense. Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and the related media, Genndy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars, Star Wars, Battlefront 2 Classic, take that place for better and for worse. Yet despite having come from this time period, I never got around to playing the movie tie-in games, the one that most caught my attention being Revenge. Guess I can cross another game off the bucket list. While LucasArts is a key player in this, that would be leaving out the other half of the team that handled this tie-in alongside George Lucas's in-house developer. This other team that helped LucasArts for the console versions of Revenge, as Ubisoft dealt with the handheld copies, was the Collective. Made up of brothers Douglas and Richard Hare, plus their friend Gary Priest, these 3 saw greener pastures than where they were working at the time of the late 90s, Virgin Interactive. While all 3 worked on the 96 point-and-click burst-developed DOS title Toonstruck, this was merely another step for them in the revolving door of companies they worked for. Richard's earliest credit to his name is 87's Leviathan, published by the English software company, while Douglas got his first credit in 88 for Kinetic Designs IO. For those wondering, the former was released on the wide range of British home computers like the Amiga, Amstrad, and ZX Spectrum, while the former was a Commodore 64 joint. Gary Priest of the 3 is the most experienced, the comely Catholic, damn you super great friend, breaking out onto the scene with the ZX Spectrum version of Frank Bruno's boxing. You know how Mike Tyson got a licensing deal with Nintendo for Mike Tyson's Punch-Out on NES? Imagine that, but with no official blessing from the company, as basically 6 dudes wrangled a name with a bit of selling power, in this case British boxer Frank Bruno, to make an unlicensed Punch-Out clone. Super Punch-Out clone to be exact, and no, not the one on the Super Nintendo. Punch-Out has a storied history within the arcades dating back to 84, branching out in 85 with the arm wrestling spin-off and sequel Super Punch-Out, both NES and SNES ports of the games being soft remakes of them, but that is a tale for another time. To end this tangent, Bruno and Tyson would have a match leading to Frank Bruno's boxing seeing a commemorative re-release as Frank Bruno's World Championship Boxing. Back to the Priest, he hovered around Gremlin Graphics Software for the rest of the decade. Gremlin is another interesting little company born out of the British wave of home computer gaming, their place of origin Sheffield, England, right in the Alpha House on Carver Street. The prison, as the Gremlins dubbed it. Straight from Crash Online's A Gremlin in the Works article, before founding Gremlin Graphics, Ian Stewart had already accumulated 12 years retailing experience, culminating in a group managership for Lasky's, but the itch to work for himself proved too strong, and he joined forces with Kevin Norburn to open a computer shop. When Kevin and myself had opened Just Micro, we always said as soon as the shop got rolling and we found the time and the necessary programmer that we would like to have our own software house. With the likes of Peter Harap and Tony Crowther joining Just Micro, that gave the guys the push to become Gremlin, racking up some impressive licenses like Disney's Michael Mouse and footballer Gary Lineker, and adding to the ranks of their team the above-mentioned Priest. While this is tangential to the main story and acts more as a transition, Gremlin would later be acquired in '99 by that shambling mimic Infogrames, leading to Gremlin's death and rebirth as Zoo in '03. Earlier, around '92 to be exact, is when Priest set off on the start of the Virgin Voyage, helping to convert Chuck Rock and Road Rash to the Sega Game Gear for the Radical Blue Giant before reaching his destination in '94 for 3DO's Demolition Man?
Skywalker, use the Force. Hey, Luke Skywalker, use the Force. How'd you get that 500 holes in your face? Learning to eat with a fork? Come on, is this the best you can do? Good, but I would say it's horrible yet terrible. Ugly yet disgusting. You suck.
You know, the rail shooter where Sylvester Stallone insults you for dying? That makes me the second Noah I know to talk about this oddity. What's a shame is that this masterpiece could have been ported to the Atari Jaguar CD alongside another 3DO rail shooter, Creature Shock, but this was never meant to be because, well, the Jaguar CD was about as ornery as its namesake, working in only the rarest of instances, and of the 13 games made for the add-on. Speaking of, the PlayStation blew away the platform much akin to what it did to the Sega Saturn. 5 report jobs, Brain Dead 13, Dragon's Lair, Myst, Space Ace, and Primal Rage, of good games that didn't need to be on the console. The rest were subject to the Jaguar's wrath, meaning they weren't good enough to deal with the hassle. For an actual official reason from Atari, here are some wordings from the letter of cancellation written by Bob Glidow to Virgin Interactive. To confirm our conversation regarding the two products titled Demolition Man and Creature Shock, we at Atari are concerned that the ongoing delay in bringing the products to market has damaged their commercial worth, and that quality levels are being reduced to facilitate completion. In these circumstances, we would prefer to withdraw from the contracts now if acceptable completion dates and quality standards cannot be agreed immediately. There's a hypocritical joke somewhere in there for Bob, though I won't deny that the 3DO is deserving of its own fair share of shellackings. Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, PO'd, and the Yakuken Special, Japanese for baseball fist, and as a strip rock, paper, scissors FMV title, were developed for the 3DO alongside Gex and D. It was around this time that the three guys had their first interactions, hitting it off assumedly well because of what happens after Toonstruck. According to a GamesIndustry article, having started their professional careers in the mid-80s, they, the brothers Hare, moved to Orange County, California in the 90s to work at Virgin Interactive. Along with colleague and friend Gary Priest, they left Virgin in 1997 to found their first independent developmental studio, The Collective. Their first gig under their own banner, porting Men in Black to the PlayStation. This kinda sets the tone for The Collective's lineup, handling higher tier licenses, though this first entry does have a bit of a funny scene as the publisher for Men in Black in the EU was Gremlin. This is all I really have for the government agents, as the game was mostly handled by Gigawatt Studios, who had a cup of coffee in the industry before leaving in '03. In all reality, the Collective's first step was Star Trek Deep Space Nine: The Fallen, which saw a number of delays, possibly due to the size of the Collective. Mentioned on GameSpot is the following. The Collective is looking for a few good employees. The game developer, which is currently developing the third-person action game Star Trek Deep Space Nine: The Fallen, recently added an employment section to its website in an effort to attract talented programmers, designers, artists, and producers. The section currently lists 10 open positions. More information about the Collective and the positions can be found at the official website. While The Fallen would see a November 2000 release date, that was only for PC, as it was also released on Mac almost 11 months after the PC copy saw the light of day. A further dive into GameSpot's archive gave me this. Simon & Schuster has announced that its upcoming action game Star Trek Deep Space Nine: The Fallen has been delayed once again. The game is being developed by the Collective, and it was originally scheduled for release in March. It was then delayed until mid-September, delayed again until October, and is now scheduled to arrive in stores on November 3rd. According to the publisher, the reason for the most recent delay is to allow for tweaking of gameplay and debugging by the developer. Developer Doug Hare of the Collective explained, "We're taking the extra time to give The Fallen the spit and polish it deserves. It'll be worth the wait." In total, 22 months. A year, almost 2, but the wait was worth it as The Fallen reviewed favorably and showed that the Collective could handle a well-known license, leading to their next venture, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. This time they were under EA, and the development of Buffy, matching the previous outing, was a bit slipshod. See, Buffy was going to be developed for 3 consoles: Dreamcast, PlayStation, and PC. In fact, at 2001's E3, the booth for the game had demo stations for those 3 consoles. From IGN, at last year's E3 show, we were able to have our first hands-on experience with Buffy, which at the time was only on the PC, Dreamcast, and PlayStation consoles. The demo was only running on a PC, but so far it looked pretty impressive. But those in the know how important the turn of the millennium was for consoles in general. My favorite son, the PlayStation 2, graced us in the year, with the Xbox following behind it. Making a game for the original PlayStation or the Dreamcast was seen as a losing cause. Why release a game on the older, crummier generation when hot new shit was out? And, well, this joke falls apart for the Dreamcast, as it technically is a 6th generation console, despite dying an early death from lack of support. Thus, the Collective curtailed gears and focused on the Microsoft black box, with Christopher Golden and Thomas East Nagoski aiding the team in the writing department. The result was actually pretty good, despite the game not selling particularly well, becoming a diamond in the rough. Because of this, LucasArts sought out the developer to give them a shot at Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb. No joke, LucasArts president Simon Jeffries said as such to IGN. Similar to LucasArts' collaborations with other premier game studios, the Collective brings considerable technological and development expertise that, in this case, will greatly benefit one of our most important brands, Indiana Jones. The Collective's efforts on the highly anticipated game Buffy the Vampire Slayer were a key component in determining this relationship. The 2 companies together will bring new and compelling elements to Indiana Jones that will ensure a deeply engaging and fun gameplay experience. This would kick off a 3-game relationship between the 2 companies, starting with Indy and ending with Revenge of the Sith. In fact, a lot of the development of Revenge of the Sith, the game, is tied to the movie, as George had both wings of his company, Lucasfilms and LucasArts, on set. If you haven't watched the short bonus feature for Episode 3 titled Making the Game, I highly implore you, as it serves as a nice little insight into how close LucasArts and the Collective were when it came to the production. John Knowles, the director of LucasArts, goes to say in that video that we were actually on set in Sydney just to soak it all in and walk around in the sets, and of course, to be there the week that they filmed this totally exciting, emotionally packed final duel between Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. It was awesome. That means the teams had access to the following: direct scenes from the movie, storyboards for scenes in the movie, cutting room floor footage for scenes that wouldn't be in the movie, visual references for dropped concepts originally going to be in the movie, a direct line to George Lucas at Skywalker Ranch, and probably the most important piece of this, consultations and teaching sessions from Nick Gellard, the stunt coordinator for the prequel trilogy. That'd be like if you got Jet Li to do mocap for a Jet Li game, which did happen by the by. Oh, and if that wasn't already enough, Hayden Christensen, noted gamer as lead artist for LucasArts Ian Milhelm points out, and one of the leads for Revenge of the Sith, also had a hand in helping the teams conceptualize tics for his character Anakin Skywalker in-game. Nick Gellard was so involved in development that LucasArts and the Collective would call him into the office for his observant eye when it came to rendering animations to make sure they matched the exact flow of the Jedi's fighting style. Probably because of this close relationship, Nick's character in the series, Sindralig, features as a boss fight. However, despite this close connection to the making of the film, only a few people reprised their roles for the game, possibly due to how close the two projects were released together. Both saw a May 2005 date, with the game coming out on Star Wars Day in America, may the 4th be with you for this joke, for the PlayStation 2, Xbox, the GBA, and DS, and the film seeing the general public on the 19th. That would mean many of the premiere actors would have to pull double duty, such as Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen, a stress crunch I wouldn't wish on anyone, while others like Samuel L. or Christopher Lee probably saw it as optional due to not having a billing role. That said, picking up the ball was the cast of Genndy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars, with the likes of James Arnold Taylor as Obi-Wan and Corey Burton as Dooku. Still a pretty stacked cast, what with Titus and Zeus filling up roles. Oh yeah, and to bring this right round to the beginning, Corey's earliest video game role was voices for Toonstruck. For a bit of a wrap-up, the release of Revenge saw the parting of LucasArts and the Collective, both suffering terrible fates. LucasArts, as you already know, got sold by George Lucas to Disney, allowing that man to do whatever he wants in life as he got, around $4 billion for the deal? The Collective, meanwhile, would only develop 2 more games in 2006. The Da Vinci Code, and shockingly, Mark Echo's Getting Up Contents Under Pressure. A game I've been meaning to get running, but as with a lot of oddball titles, there's some work that has to be done beforehand. Damn you, poor jobs and bad ISOs. That wasn't the bad fate I was mentioning, however. The Collective would end up merging with Backbone Entertainment in 2006, forming Foundation 9 Entertainment, which would later be merged with Shiny Entertainment in 2008. Thus gives us Double Helix Games, Herald of Homecoming, and the proper death of Silent Hill. At least we got the often forgotten Strider reboot out of this. With the proper console version of the game, PlayStation 2 and Xbox, trapped to the 6th generation, emulation is your friend here, though I did experience a few hiccups using PCSX2, version 1.4, it doesn't work past this. One involving red lines that required some config fuckery to fix, a pretty simple issue to solve. Another where opening and closing level cutscenes stayed on a black screen for a bit before showing what was happening. This second issue mostly applies to the clips from the movie, which I can't show anyway, so swings and roundabouts on how much this problem will affect your experience. As with the case of a lot of movie tie-ins, Revenge of the Sith follows the general skeleton of the movie. So, opening with rescuing Chancellor Palpatine, mid-portion dedicated to Grievous and Order 66, sadly no Wookiees, ending on Mustafar. Where Revenge of the Sith the game differs here is the beats in between the major moments. It's as if what was left on the cutting room floor for ideas for the movie get implemented here. Instead of Obi-Wan appearing before Grievous during the Utapau hangar sequence leading into their duel, we get to see old Ben sneak into the hangar. Likewise, during the Jedi Temple siege, we play through a lot of what was implied off-screen during Anakin's unattested slaughter. That includes having characters like Sindralig make appearances, someone who at this point in time was a background element before he would feature in Clone Wars related media. Even for the major beats, they are expanded or slightly changed from their film counterparts, with Anakin piercing Dooku instead of beheading him, or Obi-Wan and Grievous's fight taking all throughout Utapau. Revenge of the Sith also does one of my favorite things you can do with this story, having a what-if ending where Anakin defeats Obi-Wan at Mustafar and kills him. Sure, all we get is Anakin also murdering Darth Sidious in a quick cutscene, but the fact that this was included at all highlights some of the care put into this tie-in. So while at the end of the day it's still a condensed version of Revenge of the Sith, the game acts as a nice little companion piece. First things first, and the reason for why I haven't used any music from the game, it is basically John Williams' resume mixed together in a type of pseudo-remix, where certain tracks are blended together. You'll hear a sting from Return of the Jedi before it switches to a piece from a different episode. Now, why I can't play any of it is that, once again,
Michael Mouse will bury me within a burning sepulchre, where I must relive the torments of years gone by. As fun as I think it is to torture myself with the sins of the past, my own, only my own, I'm not in the mood for seeing my greatest failings again this occasion in real time with
hindsight. Likewise, many of the cutscenes are clips taken from the movie, which I also can't showcase, without fear of my remaining fractured psyche splintering further due to the influence of Ricky Roden. Learning to pick and choose your battles is an important skill, you see, though this does provide a bit of a laugh when you realize there are two casts for this game. Of course, Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen play the star leads of Obi-Wan and Anakin, with Christopher Lee, Ian McDormand, and Samuel Jackson making up the supporting cast. That is only for the movie scenes, however. Instead, filling in for the game portion of Revenge is the Clone Wars cast. James Arnold Taylor and Matt Lucas are in the hot seat as Obi and Annie. And for the most part, James carries his usual gusto as Ben, with the only downside to his performance being the repetition of some lines. But Matt Lucas sounds especially lifeless as Skywalker.
I am a humble student of the Force. These droids don't quit. Back. You make this too easy.
Much better. Make your peace. You're about to die. You were dead when I walked in the room. Don't make me kill you.
I will do what I must.
You will try, my old friend. You're too late.
Hare! The dark side is not the way!
I do what I must to end the war.
Stay down.
On one hand, Matt Lucas in the original Clone Wars show was capable of giving range the duel with Ventress proof enough. On the other, I'm going to assume Matt was directed to sound closer to Hayden's performance, which was pretty dull and whiny, so it isn't like I can't say he isn't trying. Either way, he does sound like movie Anakin, which can be positive or negative depending on how much you ironically like Christensen's wooden delivery, something I tend to blame on his directing more than his acting chops.
I knew I couldn't trust you.
Lay down your sword. Anakin, please, come back to the light. Face up to what you've done. I can help you.
It's too late for that. You're too late. You only want to help yourself.
You know that's not true.
I never thought I'd be so happy to see a ray shield. I'm glad you're safe, R2. Let's go see how much trouble Obi-Wan has got himself into now.
Broadband lockdown activated. All levels secured.
Ray shields. This just keeps getting better.
Sir, the shields have blocked our reinforcements. Disable them and we'll have clear access to the entire stronghold.
Good. Where?
Down there. Good luck, sir.
Luck. In my experience, there's no such thing.
Everyone else puts in a fine performance as their given character, Matthew Wood, one of the only returning actors to voice his, that being General Grievous. Again, if you have even a passing relationship with Star Wars, you know how the soundscape will sound like. It's one of those moments where I don't have to describe it, mostly because Star Wars, as a cornerstone, has been ingrained into the cultural makeup to the point that if you don't know what to expect, you've been living under a rock for the past 40 plus years.
What are you doing?
He's a traitor to the Republic. Letting him live is too dangerous.
Letting you kill him is against our Jedi beliefs. I won't allow it.
Anakin, come to your senses. So be it.
You're too late to help me here, troopers. Head up to the next platform.
I'm sorry, sir. We are no longer required to follow your orders.
What did you say, soldier?
Stop, Jedi!
Relax. I'm in control.
Yes, sir.
You can do better than that. You're no better than a droid. I don't want to fight you! That console should shut down the shield.
You know how a blaster shot will sound like, or how a lightsaber whirs when hitting something, so while there isn't much to cover on that front, the visuals are a different story, mostly because of what was mentioned in history, Nick Gellard and Hayden Christensen's consultation. Keeping with the range of movement the Jedi expressed in the prequel trilogy, flippy-whippy shit making the X Division proud as opposed to the slower, more deliberate send-up to Japanese sword bouts, a lot of the animations in the game are flashy as fuck, from basic combo strings to parries to grabs. All characters capable of wielding a lightsaber have their own set of animations, so while Obi and Ani have the same button combinations for their moves, how each of them look differs. Anakin plays harder with his lightsaber, pulling off repeated slashes and complex change-ups with it, while Obi-Wan incorporates a lot of striking into his mix-ups, adding sweeping kicks and hand thrusts to his repertoire of saber swings. You get a real good feel of their characters from how they fight, with Obi more graceful and Ani brutal, capsulized in their critical strikes. While they both share the basic thrust, Ben's level 2 is a flashing of 3 flowing slices, showcasing his composure under fire. Skywalker, meanwhile, revels in his strength, simply grabbing his opponent and stabbing with his armament dual mecha style. And this is merely the tip of the iceberg, as I haven't even brought up the other characters like Dooku and his duelist stances and ripostes, or Grievous and his forearmed fury or foregoing of traditional styles.
If you hurt him, I'll kill you.
Yes, I believe you will.
Ha! You call this a fight?
This is for Obi-Wan.
Speaking of slower and more deliberate, Old Kenobi and Vader are both unlockable bonus characters, having their more samurai-inspired flourishes and swings, with added touches like Vader's grab being a force choke. And if you think the buck stops there, the droids, clones, and Temple Jedi get on the action too, with some of the most beautifully animated characters in the game being the Magna droids and the clone assassins. You know the development team was on some shit when I must point out how some enemies react and move. Magna droids are the only enemy in the game that have specific animations if two of them are together. They get full-on tandem attacks. Not only do you get to be berated by their soulless monotone barking out insults, they have the flair to back it up. Even their dodge isn't a traditional twirl, but a strange twist, completely rotating the robotic frame around their staff before shooting forward, sparking the ground. The clone assassins are a wily bunch, adopting a low posture to help with evasion, something they effortlessly do when attacked. Like the Magna twins, the assassins have a whole subset of animations dedicated to them, as they have grab counters, usually involving them dodging and responding with a stunning kick. And of course, this game has the whole Star Wars vibe visually as well. Places featured in the movie look just like they do, with the expanded segments painting a clearer picture of each world, from Utapau and its cavernous yet vertigo-inducing pit cities, to Mustafar's industrial lava plant, to the highly traditionalist and sacred Jedi temple. While the graphics have aged, that is part and parcel of this era, and on the whole, I don't think Revenge has done 10 years in 2. If anything, the game visually reminds me of the first God of War. Don't ask me why, I just get the same vibe. Artistic direction and graphic fidelity are different beasts, one lasting longer than the other to the test of time. And, well, when your aesthetic is Star Wars, it's hard to be displeased with anything. All I can honestly point out is that the two ship bosses have basically the same movements despite their dissimilar makings, but that's a nitpick needle in a haystack of good. Turns out Star Wars translates well, most of the time, to video games on all presentational fronts. Who knew? Revenge of the Sith is a character action game with slight detours for the occasional turret segment, and has an especially light level up mechanic. On the sliding scale of acid-jazzed orchestra, Revenge lands closer to the side that John Williams practices, with the game lacking a hard ranking system. More on this later, as there is one in place, but it isn't in the same vein as a lot of character action games, and combos being set in stone instead of build your own. Think more along the lines of the EA-produced Lord of the Rings tie-in games to Two Towers and Return of the King compared to Devil May Cry or Bayonetta. And going along those same lines, Revenge is pretty standard when it comes to its difficulty. It's average all around except for a few spikes. I think there may be an option to change the difficulty within the options menu, but seeing as I never ventured there, I couldn't tell you. Level structure is confined to A to B affairs, rooms separated usually by enemies to beat up or an object you have to interact with, like doors that need to be cut open or rubble that needs to be moved with the Force. What matters the most here, however, is that there are two playable characters in the main campaign, Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. The twosome are their own characters, meaning what you find and level up for them in their levels will only pertain to them. More on this and what happens after finishing a stage. The experience is about half and half, with neither of the two taking up a majority of the spotlight, so you'll get accustomed to how Ben and Annie feel in combat, though there are long instances of playing one character only to be switched to the other, which can throw you off, like the first stage on Utapau as Obi, which happens after around 3 stages of Anakin on Grievous's frigate. Before each stage, you are given a little rundown of what the stage will cover, as well as who you'll be playing for it in the form of a text crawl, making up the pre-stage menu. This menu also serves as the stage select, as you can replay stages in case you miss secrets, or want more experience than what you got within a stage. More on both of those later. Once you decide what stage you want to play, you get a tiny little opening cutscene usually from the movie to set the scene, then you're off to the races. As with a lot of character action games, there is little to no camera movement from the player, though the camera is usually brought far enough back so you can see where you need to go or who's trying to kill you. And since this is Star Wars, if an enemy's not directly in your face trying to beat you up, they have a blaster that practically tells you where they are standing. But seeing as I'm still covering basic character moves, not enemies right now, I'll save that for later. Anakin and Obi-Wan from the get-go have access to light and heavy attacks, a critical strike, a range of force powers, saber throw, force push, force grasp, force stun, though Anakin replaces it with lightning while Obi-Wan gets the mind trick, force heal and force dash, a guard and its force variant, and a somewhat needless jump as when locked on to an enemy, in this case holding guard, you dodge. Combo strings in Revenge are as simple as switching up pressing light and heavy and maybe holding the control stick in a direction, with the duo in essence having all their basic moves right from the get-go. That doesn't mean Obi and Ani share fighting styles or attack speeds, however. Obi-Wan's square triangle 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 combo is different from Anakin's in all notions. This applies to most of their moves, both from the start and unlocked ones, and because of this, I can't give a detailed breakdown as functionality starting and ending lag and hit amounts differ too much. While you can play Revenge with what the game offers at the start, let me get into the level up mechanic. Anytime you hit an enemy, regardless if they are blocking or not, you build up a bar around your character's HUD icon. When you kill one, however, a word flashes up on the screen based on how much bar you've built up, ranging from fair, good, impressive, or masterful. These words act as the pseudo-style system, granting more experience the higher you get on the bar. At full meter, every enemy you kill will give you masterful, but this only lasts for a short while as the bar automatically drains itself back to 0 after a set period of time. The meter also decreases when taking damage, blocking hits, or an action. Certain moves grant more meter, as killing an enemy with a critical strike will always provide a healthy boost to your style bar, but a key thing to note is that Obi-Wan and Anakin don't have a lot of iframes. The only time they get them is when they recover from being knocked down, as in, while critical strikes give you more meter, they leave you susceptible to damage. Dying is pretty nasty in this game, as in a lot of levels, there are no checkpoints forcing you to restart from the beginning of the stage. There are back-to-health pickups in both small and large, but they can be rare to find sometimes, with the most reliable way to heal yourself being force heal. While health doesn't regenerate, Ani and Obi's force energy does, albeit slowly. Force energy is needed to do a lot of moves, from basic force powers to specific critical strikes, combo enders, area attacks, dashing attacks, what name you. There is a sizable move pool that the game thankfully tracks in the menu, where you can see what can be used and when, and how annoying some of these moves are to pull off, as there isn't a lot of indication if you need to perform certain control stick movements before the button press, or simultaneously. Only when you clear a stage can you spend your earned experience points on your moves of choice, and the game is pretty free-form with leveling, as you can add points to a category to see what you get, and if you don't like it, you can retract them to place them somewhere else. Points are only finalized after you tell the game you are finished spending points. Take note, however, that what you unlock for one character doesn't transfer to the other. If Obi-Wan has level 2 force healing, that doesn't mean Anakin will have it as well. You'll need to put points into that category for him to get it too. Stages also have a set amount of experience points you can earn within them, so if you do decide to replay a stage, you must earn more than what you got last time to get those remaining points. Now, why you'd want to replay a stage is that every level has secrets, ranging from 2 at the minimum and 6 at the maximum. 3 in total, they are the saber crystals, which grant immediate masterful, red stamina pickups that extend your health meter, and blue force pickups that extend your force meter. While these are secrets, don't mistake them for optional. You'll want to find the extendo secrets, as having more health and force energy at your disposal will help you in the long run, as your foes won't grant you any mercy, and like leveling up, what Obi-Wan finds will only count for him and vice versa. They are split up into a few categories ranging from droid, clone, Jedi, separatist, and misc, because I don't have a good name for the spider, buzz, droid, turret, gunship group. Of the listed, droid, clone, and separatist are standard enemy types, coming in flavors of melee and ranged. Going with the latter first, These are your regular battle droids and clone soldiers to snipers and rocket men. They like to attack from afar because they have the propensity to crumble under a blade, lacking health but usually coming in big groups, or are far off in the distance requiring a context-sensitive force jump to get to, some clever blaster deflecting, as hitting guard right as a blaster shot gets near you reflects it, and there is the force guard that does the same but uses energy, or a force power to stop. The odd ones out in this grouping are the super battle droids, droidicas, and droid commandos, as the first can actually take a beating before going down, the second has a shield that must be popped with a force power or blaster deflection, and the last has a guard it sometimes uses. Outside of throws and some specified attacks, guards can't be broken and will usually lead to a counter, though this is unit dependent. As such, melee enemies include the two variants of Super Battle Droid Brawlers, Magna Droids, Separatist Baton and Axemen, and Clone Heavy Troopers. These are guys with a good amount of health that muck in to protect their ranged counterparts, busying you with their ability to block, grab, or counter as the blastermen pick you off. They are also good experience wells due to how easy it is to build up meter due to their willingness to block anything. The only ones really worth noting are the Magna Droids because they fight more like a Jedi type enemy but don't have their inherent strengths, switching out force powers and the ability to block them for tandem attacks and desperation moves, the Separatist Batonmen because they stun on hit, and the Axemen who could have easily won the Clone Wars. Those last two aren't fun to fight. The missed group are the stationary turrets, vehicle class enemies like clone walkers and gunships, buzz, and spider droids. Stationary turrets are the same as they've ever been in every video game ever. I.E. deflect their fire, as you can do that in this universe. Clone walkers hit at them till they die, as strategy goes out the window for them. Gunships dodge and use saber throw and other force powers. Buzz are barely worth mentioning, they die in one hit, and spider droids can only be damaged from the front and are bosses in 2 instances. You can grab them from the back, but it's awkward to do and doesn't deal as much damage as it should, so just 2-step them. This leaves the Jedi type enemies, which have basic variants in the Jedi Temple stages, but all major bosses are in this category. Most can do the same things as the player. In fact, the final boss is both Anakin and Obi-Wan, like block force powers or use critical strikes, and all fights against major bosses are pitted in duels where the shunt and clash mechanics come into play. When 2 attacks collide, this initiates a clash where you must mash light and heavy attack to win, otherwise you'll take a sizable amount of damage. Shunts, meanwhile, are parries. By pressing guard while simultaneously either flicking the control stick forward or away from your opponent, you can catch them in a parry and deal some damage. That said, the timing is a bit weird. Shunts can't be done mid-guard in case you failed the shunt but blocked the attack, and shunt parries can also be parried, leading to no damage and a neutral reset. Every named character has their own subset of force powers and moves, so fighting Dooku will be different from Grievous to Windu to the final boss and beyond, as this game has bonus missions, fun little survival stages as some of the other Jedi-type characters, plus the Vader-Ben duel from A New Hope, and a multiplayer fighting mode. To get characters and stages for this mode, though, you have to defeat the prerequisite duel, so if you want to relive Grievous's training under Dooku, you have to beat both within the story. As mentioned above, the feeling of fighting droids, clones, or what have you is fantastic because it's all animated to the nines. This is what I mean when a game lies on the orchestral side of the character action scale. Mechanically, Revenge of the Sith is easy to understand. It is more pick up and play than other games within the genre. Think akin to the Batman Arkham games for this one, and I'll have to delve a bit more into the philosophy of these types of entries into the genre. The scale I use isn't a condemnation for what is good or bad. Acid jazz to orchestra is simply a measurement of what the game has a focus in. Bayonetta wants to challenge you with its combo system and thinking on the fly, thus you have rather flowing combat, with every move capable of being chained together. God of War Classic wants to visually stun you with over-the-top animations and brutality, with the actual meat and fat of the gameplay simple to pick up and understand. There is some overlap, sure, and my scale isn't perfect, but one having simpler controls or less combo potential isn't the negative here. It's the emotional response that is measured, and I sure do get a kick out of Obi and Ani pulling off their attack strings with the grace and skill of their title. It's kinetically pleasing and spikes my brain with that precious happy juice dopamine, the same way hitting mooks in Batman Arkham does. The fact that all their combos are completely different from the others sets the duo apart despite the simplified controls. What helps is that outside of a few instances, I'll see you in Mustafar, I like how enemies are grouped together. Usually you get a good balance of ranged enemies mixed in with melee attackers, providing a nice dilemma to work out as you're cutting up. Ranged mooks aren't dangerous once ran up on, but they come in packs and generally whittle your health down, making dealing with melee foes harder as they get pot shots in from down the way. They make excellent critical strike fodder, however, giving you a good boost to your experience points. Melee enemies, meanwhile, are sturdier, can take a beating, granting their friends time to lay down fire, but due to their knack for blocking, you can build up meter quite easily as long as you can catch them guarding. What this means is that do you play a bit safer, trashing melee enemies so you can collect ranged ones with a critical strike, or do you take advantage of the opportunity for big points? Once you hit Masterful, you're on the clock as the meter drains itself to 0 after a period of time, and all it counts are kills. One-shotting a battle droid or clone at full meter gives you a tally for Masterful, so it does help in the long run to keep a few easy-to-kill enemies in your back pocket. This keeps you thinking on your toes mid-encounters and provides one of the challenges of the game that isn't just, don't die to clankers. Well, I do think this system kinda stumbles against the tougher threats like Magna Guards or Spider Droids and within the duels, as keeping meters a bit of a crapshoot against enemies that play just as aggressive as you can or don't provide the opportunity to damage easily. It isn't enough for me to completely disregard it. Under that same sort of mindset, I have a love-hate relationship with all the duels in the game. So with the positives, and probably my favorite thing from Revenge of the Sith, the Anakin and Obi-Wan you fight at the end of the game is who you made. What you spent points in, what force powers you leveled up, what health and force energy secrets you found. All of it. Finale Anakin and Obi-Wan is a test against the moveset you crafted for their character, leading to a varied final bout that can go a number of ways. Since I chose to be more force sensitive with Anakin, he didn't have some dash or area attacks making his battle easy as Obi-Wan, yet in reverse, I gave Obi-Wan more saber moves like the preemptive counter, making him much tougher for me as Anakin. I'm already a sucker for rival battles, so having the rival be not only a playable character, but one affected by what you chose for them is the chef's kiss design. That means if you wanted a challenge run where you didn't level up either character, you would face a bare minimum version of the final boss. Or if you spent the time to find every secret and count experience points, you get rewarded with a truly epic showdown like how LucasArts and the Collective intended. The other duels may not reach up to the same lofty heights as the Crown Jewel for Revenge of the Sith, but are fun in their own ways as well. The Dooku encounter is a nice introductory duel that eases the player into them, as its first segment has Obi-Wan aid the player before letting them fly on their own for stage 2, then having the third part include some super battle droids running interference, only to return to a one-on-one confrontation. It serves to teach you that all duels are segmented, and some characters don't start a fight off using all their moves. This later gets capstoned with Grievous, who is definitely a notable step up from Dooku, but he reveals a few weaknesses duelists have, that being force attacks having downtime that can be exploited. Mace Windu is when the teaching stops and you have to implement what you learned from Dooku and Grievous to stand a chance. Knowing that you can block all force powers, which helps to drain your opponent's energy, or using moves with hard knockdown to take advantage of force heal. While I do have qualms with the duels, I do love that healing is a risky option in one. It is the only time I think that the slow force energy recharge actually facilitates some interesting design. Aggressiveness means you don't have force energy to spare for healing, so your blocking game and countering must be on point. Defensiveness keeps energy in reserve for when the need arrives, but blocking force moves drains energy ever so slightly, and some moves are unblockable. You have to find a balance of knowing when to go for swinging or ease up and turtle a bit for safety. It's very telling that this hits close to Gellard's Jedi combat instruction and can even be noticed in the movies. For a brief bit of nerddom, Qui-Gon Jinn and Phantom Menace lost due to a mismatch of styles, the overtly aggressive Maul crushing his defense. When Obi-Wan takes the plate where his master once stood to finish the fight, he opts to push the pace and forego his defensive style, besting Maul. From that point onward, Obi-Wan used a merging of his previous fighting style with a more offensive one, leading to what we saw at the end of Revenge when Anakin opted for pure power as opposed to rationality and got de-limbed. Playing the game, you want to be like Anakin and wallow in power, but learning as Obi-Wan will lead to victory more times than not and is more satisfying. That's a neat little observation tying the movies to Revenge of the Sith the game, and is merely one of a plethora of ideas that get showcased heavier within the interactive journey because of film runtime. Again, like a lot of Star Wars games, Revenge of the Sith serves to add on to what the movies have provided in interesting and thoughtful ways. Outside of some of the awkward setups for moves that I mentioned in gameplay, the only normal level on Mustafar is single-handedly the worst segment of the game solely due to what populates the stage. The Separatists in Star Wars are rightfully taken as wimpy bureaucrats, needing the likes of the droids, General Grievous, and Dooku to bolster their military might. That's an outright lie. Separatist foot soldiers are among the sturdiest of enemies within the game, easily beating out the likes of the Jedi Padawans and higher tier droids. This all stems from what the Separatists are able to do. The smaller basic melee unit has a stun baton that makes you defenseless when hit with it, allowing the grunts, as this enemy type comes in droves and is usually supporting the heavy Separatist axemen or being supported by ranged enemies, to crowd around and stun lock you. They also have the fastest attack in the game, leading to annoying sequences of trying to stop their buffoonery only to be met with a series of stunning blows taking away chunks of your health. Tangentially, this is connected to another issue regarding move frames, which I'll get to in a minute. Acting as the muscle for these already dangerous foes are the Axemen, taking the worst aspects of all the melee units and putting them into one enemy. Like a majority of melee-focused units, the Axemen love to guard, but they share the same propensity to counter from a block like the dual-sided Jedi in the Temple or droid commandos. If that wasn't bad enough, the Axemen don't suffer from hit stun, effectively making the only way to deal with them being critical strikes or force powers, both having their own flaws, shared and otherwise, in this situation. On the whole, both options are relatively slow, about 5 regular critical strikes needed to put one of these behemoths down, while a fully upgraded Force Lightning with max force bar will need about 3/4 to do one in. You fight on average about 2 at a time, so these guys are massive roadblocks in that regard. On separate issues, critical strikes can be blocked by the Axemen, making a tussle against them last that much longer as you can't get a decent shot on them. Sure, you can go for the more advanced versions of the attack, but the starting lag for any of them is enough of a delay for you to get hit out of it by one of the other enemies crowding you. And because these techniques require force energy to use and expend a huge portion of your bar to do so, missing with one is massively detrimental. Especially if the Axemen go for their grab, which has a tiny window to break out of, leading to the double whammy of losing force energy and health. Force Lightning, Anakin's purely offensive force power, suffers from leaving you vulnerable at all stages of the move, from wind-up to delivery to ending lag. It's useful in a pinch against a singular enemy, provided they aren't capable of blocking it like any lightsaber wielders, but the cost of using it is too much for its own good. That's a shame, really, as this is Anakin's unique power from Obi-Wan's, who just has his mind trick on top of the duo's shared stun at the start of the game. A bit of a side point away from enemy design, Force Recharge Rate puts a damper on all the Force powers. There's no efficiency either way, powers using too much Force energy to incorporate them effectively into combat, and the meter recharging too slowly, forcing you to pick and choose what parts of your moveset you want to use. The mounted turrets exist solely to drain meter, as the only sensible way to destroy them is by force blocking, which requires energy to do, and Due to the turrets firing in bursts, you can easily accidentally use up more force than you need to. But that's not the end of it. Most of Obi and Annie's moveset needs force to work, thus leading me back to the statement that the game kinda limits you on what priorities you'll take with your moves. Like, Force Push and Grasp are so niche in their uses that all I got out of them was either grabbing secrets or knocking foes off ledges if I could, with Saber Throw beating out the both of them because it essentially did their job better. And that's only if I was not wanting to get near who was shooting at me, or if I couldn't, like in the case of the gunship fights, the only time Force Grasp really sees any usage. Same line of thinking, dash attacks lose out to area attacks, as expending force to dash is probably the worst way to use it when you can hit through guard with a stationary charge attack. Guess this leads me to the bosses, which I have said I have a love-hate relationship with. If you thought what I mentioned previously was a planet full of guardsmen, my will broke before my opponent's guard did. Duels are wars of attrition, stemming from low damage output on regular attacks, the tankiness of the characters, and how a lot of moves are counterable. Grabs that can get through guard can be negated, the whole shunt system is somewhat poorly explained, bordering on Metal Gear Rising levels, which isn't a good thing if you even know a passing whiff of how that game handles parries, and lacks definitiveness. Force powers can be blocked at a small cost of force energy, and most characters are capable of healing. So while on the visual front it looks flashy and there's some fun to be had just because my dumb amoeba brain can't look at a Jedi duel without thinking some part of it will be exciting to see, what hampers these fights the most and is the biggest problem of the game in general is the wind-up. No moves are cancelable. Once you are committed to an attack, that's that. In the matter of, say, the Soulsborne series or others cut from the same cloth, this is part of the challenge. You have to measure out your attack frames to give you time to dodge, heal, or parry. In character action, combat needs to be much less restricted, otherwise you get these odd instances like being negative on hit. A punishment not by design, but lack thereof. You should never be punished for pushing the advantage in character action. Hell, a lot of the games in the genre are built around always being able to push the advantage, like Devil May Cry and its jump canceling, and later style switching, allowing you to lay on damage while still granting you access to guard options when you need them. Because in Revenge you are negative on hit, bosses can knock you out of hit strings as hit stun lasts little and a number of moves have long frames in between them or have too long ending lag. These aren't special moves either. These are basic square and triangle combos that come pre-packaged with Obi and Ani. This specter hangs over the entire game, but really rears its head during any duel. Oh, and one last thing. While having an AI partner in a level is cool and all, they can take your experience chances away. Guess that means Obi-Wan was holding Anakin back from being a Jedi Master as well, seeing as he wants to hog all the experience for himself. While Revenge of the Sith doesn't measure up to the other greatest hits of the character action genre, it is a fun game through and through, akin to the licensed Lord of the Rings games that EA published. Slicing up separatist forces, clones, or Jedi is enjoyable as the game offers a somewhat expansive list of moves and abilities. While there are problems like animation speed making some battles a bit unfun and some truly annoying design choices, Revenge of the Sith carries a lot of charm, far outweighing the negative with its knack for including dropped elements from the movie, the dueling mode, and bonus missions. This is a game definitely worth emulating, though do take heed of the issues with configuring it before you practice your Jedi moves. It feels good to get a right proper history tab this time around, one that has a lot of twists and turns to its length and has some pretty circular revelations in between. Been a while since I had to do some worthwhile digging, and I did miss having to with the last 2 episodes, so good thing Revenge pulled double duty with its connection to the British home computer era and the failed next-gen consoles like the Jaguar and 3DO. It's not every day my obscure age game info gets to be applied, as not only was Yakukin released on the 3DO, and wasn't the only game of its kind to be on the system I.E, the Onisan to Isho games were also on it, but the Sega Saturn as well. Sega does what Nintendo don't, which apparently means showing some skin in low-res FMV glory. Anywho, this show is made possible with the likes of the moviegoers within the Peanut Gallery and Inner Circle. Consider buying a ticket at patreon.com/let's talk about games, no apostrophe in the let's, for behind-the-scenes access to LTA scripts, thumbnails, other bonus material, your name in the credits, and early screenings of episodes, plus the Showtime reels. A sickness had me pinned down for January, nothing too serious at least I hope. So this intended for January release probably came out in February. What a paradox. So for the sake of simplicity, January Showtime reel was a safari into the wonderful world of Pokemon Snap, with February having some sewer surfing with 2003's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Cowabunga! And as always, this showing of Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith the game, is over, but stay tuned for our next feature involving a deviation ahead of its time, amnesia, and a light gun.